Good morning. Welcome to episode 110 of the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the drilling, construction, water, and geothermal industry. I'm your host, Brock Diordi, and this week we're going to jump right back into our great conversation, part two, with Kevin Austin of Water Furnace. He's going to continue to discuss with us about collaborating and what it's going to take for our industry to meet our 2030 goals. This is our new series that'll become a standalone called Thermal Networking, where we feature and have great discussions with industry professionals and innovators, game changers that are helping us push to that 2030 goal, to 2050, and making us have a better planet, a firm, good heating and cooling source, along with reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Really excited to jump into part two with you. But I have a challenge for you, industry. And this week it's going to be Memorial Day weekend. We know it's hot. We know our people are going out. They're working. What is our climatization of our employees as the extreme heat steps in? I think we need to think about the wide variety of people that we employ, from their age to their weight to their metabolism to how susceptible they are, what type of prescription drugs they're on, what their lifestyle is like in the evenings, how they come to work in the morning, 3 cans of Monster, and other choices. We gotta stay hydrated. We need to think about the effects of the heat, how we have for shade, and I want you to really get into a process of climatization and how much work can we do in extreme heat and how we build upon it. Of course, you folks in the southeast, south, southwest are laughing at it, but no, we all need to consider these impacts and the individuals who have been severely injured or died in the last couple of years. Let's get smart and safe. I want to jump us right back into part two of Thermal Networking, our new standalone series. Kevin Austin being our first guest. He's got a lot more great knowledge to share, and we're going to get into the collaboration. You can start talking about IGSPA, NGWA, and the Geothermal Drillers Association and how they all fit together. We as a drilling industry, drilling contractors, have to come, right into a project with our professionalism and our insight and not be scared to raise our hand and say, what about this? This seems off. And, we're so scared to say, we'll catch it in a change order, or we don't want to let our competitor see the same flaw we do. But if I can say anything from Ball State to today, I see a lot of similar mistakes still happening. And it's a bummer because we got 100 million bore feet to drill in New York.
Right.
Massachusetts has lofty goals. This city of Chicago wants to do 60 miles of loop a year for the next 30 years. We're not even talking about the whole country yet.
Right. And it's coming, Brock. I really do believe it's coming. And I think if you look at those tragic trench fatalities and other such circumstances, I think if you took any one of those particular projects and you look at it, it's not one single either shortcut or mistake. It's usually a combination of things that occurred to create that very unfortunate end result. So as long as we continue to talk about it, to apply, people look at OSHA as the enemy, and they're really not. They really are there for the employee safety and wellness, and really the health and wellness of the company as well. I mean, it's impossible to continue to grow a company and sustain fatalities, in the process. So certainly something that needs constant and additional awareness, discussion. Again, it's the safety, it's the communication, it has to be incorporated in everything we do.
So we get beyond those three: basic contract and handshake, the way to operate, or what do you say there, Kevin?
I think you need a very detailed contract. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing residential light commercial or a major university. There are expectations on both sides of the table, and I think the fair and equitable way to handle that is to have a very detailed contract, and it needs to include everything. And the contracts, whether they're AIA, American Institute of Architecture contracts that are used, companies have their own individual forms, but essentially you have to address everything from working hours, working conditions, weather conditions, permits, bonding, site conditions, site utilities, fencing, temporary facilities. There's just so many facets. And that's why you need somebody who has experience in doing projects, be it in geothermal, be it in commercial construction, who can lead and guide you to a successful project. Somebody's going to have to pay for all of these elements, whether it's temporary fencing for a job site, whether it's water disposal, materials on a job, so why not have those conversations up front, understand whose contract they're in, and make it very clear. You're basically going to cut the lawyers out of the equation if you do that. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's a little time consuming, but that time up front, I think, is really well spent, and is going to lead to much safer and happier and more productive project.
Gosh, I think of temporary fencing, and at the time I wouldn't have known anything at Ball State that we
Sure.
went from 9 months to 2 years. We were
Right.
active, we were progressing, people are happy. I was on a big water project in Florida that was supposed to be 18 months. And then there was a catastrophic failure in the hole and we had to move. And so we restarted the clock. It's 36 months. We had 20 months negotiated with fence. Talking about contacting and trying to extend temporary fencing where they
Right.
go, you're going to buy it. You're going to buy our fence. And
Yep.
this is the price you're buying it for.
Yep.
None of that was in any piece. And suddenly you can't take down the fence and put up a new fence. It's what we ended up doing was come get your fence. We have somebody right behind you that's going to put up another one.
Sure.
But that's a bottom line impact that can really kick your butt.
Wasn't anticipated, was it? Another example of that, Brock, is, I don't know if you recall this or not, when MEP designed the Ball State project, they said we're going to drill 1,800 wells, they called them. And so it came time to start the project, and the general contractor looked at Ortman Drilling and Triton Geothermal and said, hey, you need to get your permit. I said, well, boys, if you look at our proposal, we've excluded permits. So they go down to the permit office in Muncie, Indiana, and the permit office says, okay, well, let's see. We got 1,800 wells. Our standard fee is $50 per well. So that's $90,000 you owe us. That ultimately got settled behind closed doors. But what came out of that for us was a lesson to make sure that the permitting is addressed in advance, and also the terminology. And I've spoke on this for years, that they're not wells. Unless it's an open loop application, they're not. They're boreholes, because we're not pulling water out of the ground. We're not introducing anything back to the ground. So the semantics there, the terminology is important. And had they just listed them as boreholes, there would have never been an issue. So just lessons learned over the years, and that's where contracts come from. But having that addressed in advance really can save a lot of lost time.
I remember that story because they came out to the field, and I joked that with the amount of money they were going to make, they were going to bring out Cuban Gooding Jr. and just say, show me the money. Show me the money.
Absolutely. Nice.
So if you think about that aspect, how about before and after, project restoration? This is a university that is operating. The South Field was in a parking lot. The North Field was softball fields and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Great point. And something else that is a lesson learned. And I preach photo documentation before, during, and after. And I submit that you take photographs often. You send them to your up the food chain, to your general contractor, the engineer. This is what we're doing. We photograph everything, so pre-existing site conditions, I was on a project for the city of Indianapolis, actually the town of Speedway, Indiana. We put in some new commercial water wells, and after the job, they wanted $150,000 to repave their parking lot, saying that we had alligatored all the asphalt in the parking lot. And I just sat down with a whole list of or a whole pile of photographs. Oh, no, boys, here's the parking lot before we started. And they said, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess I kind of forgot about that." So it isn't a blame game. If we're responsible for something as a contractor, then we want to take care of that. If we're not responsible for it, obviously we don't want it to eat into our profit margin. So photo documentation with a time state stamp, date stamp on it, I think is very important.
What I find funny, um, this was, digital cameras and real cameras at this time, right? Like
We
our
were in that
ability to
transition for sure.
our
Uh,
ability to document now is what if we just had a thing that we could call people on and video and take photos and upload them instantly?
sure, right. Yeah, there was no Zoom and Teams, and I don't even know if the cloud was actually fully integrated at that point. I think that was a new concept, but we were taking digital photos, but yeah, it was pretty crude back then. Yeah.
All right, let's talk
So
relationship.
last thing I'll say on that, and regardless of whether it's a single borehole on a residential project, whether it's a Ball State, a Princeton, a Stanford University, there's going to be problems on jobs. There just is. So understand that, and then be prepared to have open, earnest discussions and come up with conflict resolution measures. It's not rocket science. You know, we've all done this. We're going to continue to do it. So, as my dad told me for many, many years, it's not the crisis, it's how you handle it. So, be professional, be upfront. If it's your responsibility, own it, take care of it, move on. There's no sense in bringing the industry down for the sake of trying to claim a couple dollars. So, yeah,
And that was leading right into what I wanted to see. We've worked so long together, had some good beverages on the side and really
sure.
talked about this. Uh,
Yep.
that relationship aspect, of being able to just be candid and direct and, how do you build that?
You know, I think it's the golden rule. I think it's just being honest and open with people. Um, I think it's doing your homework. It is just being a person of integrity, a company of integrity. Say what you're going to do and do what you say you're going to do. So um, it is important to be prepared going into these projects, to be knowledgeable, and then to honor your obligations. And it goes back to that safety, planning, and communication. If we don't do those elements, we're setting up ourselves for failure. But if we follow those procedures that we have, there's a problem, stop, get people out of harm's way, get the folks involved, and just have an open, candid conversation. Here's the situation. Either we have a solution for it, or we're open to ideas, and figure out what has to be done, and how it's going to be addressed, and in what timeline, and how it's going to be measured. Take those steps, then go back and evaluate, make sure it was done properly, and then learn from it. Whether it was costly in terms of time or dollars, or just energy, but learn from those, and make changes to future projects so you don't run into those same circumstances again, if possible. Some things are just going to happen. That's just the way it is.
Love that. And I think a big piece to this is as we read the DOE reports, or you look at state reports that are coming out, we have a bottleneck in getting implementation done. And we say it's the drilling phase. And so what's happening? We're looking at waste heat, we're looking at alternatives. And I know we want to talk about that, but really for us to thrive and being able to do more bore fields and thermal networks and whatnot, understanding that relationship and how we come at it as the professional versus saying, man, it was way easier to just turn this entire 500 acres into a solar farm,
Mhm.
and we've lost the initiative.
There are so many opportunities, and you mentioned earlier about thermal energy networks, and that wasn't a term that we were using 10, 15 years ago, but
2 years
certainly
ago.
is on the forefront now. And I think it's a combination of, every job is not going to be vertical geothermal, but there are ways to utilize the resources that are there. Um, whether it's vertical drilling, horizontal pond loops, whether you're combining solar and geothermal, wind, solar, and geothermal. Maybe there's applications where you still need some gas boilers as backup for peak demand and those types of things. So I don't think there's just one solution for anything. I think it's going to take some creative thinking and engineering to assemble a team of people who can look at what the real needs are, what the future needs may be, allow for expansion, and then plan and execute accordingly.
So let's talk about that. You and I are on several of the same calls
We
because we're
are.
crazy and we overcommit to everything, or we really love this
Agreed.
industry.
Both. I think both are
So
true.
we heard this just the other day. 44,500,000 feet of geothermal bore field needed. This is what is on the books. That this isn't hypothetical stuff. This is stuff they're talking about that we're counting on. 90,000 additional heat pumps. There's so many. So you and I were quickly scribbling on our notepads and whatnot
Right.
while this was coming up. Give us the breakdown of what you were looking at, because you and I had similar numbers.
And I think this is a good segue from the conversation that we were just having. There again, I don't think there is a single solution to any of these goals. They are huge goals, and they are growing. The markets are growing, the need is growing, and the demand is growing. So there's not a single solution. You're not going to go solve all this with vertical geothermal. You're not going to solve it all with pond loops, lake loops. You're not going to solve it all with commercial or residential. I think it is going to take a unified, collective industry coming together of all the applications: vertical, horizontal, directional, angular drilling, pond lake loops, um, you know, uh,
Wastewater.
wastewater. Absolutely. I think that's going to become another large part of it. Solar and wind certainly work into those. It is going to take a collective body of people that want to see the industry grow. You want to see the United States and the world, really, it's a global economy, to be successful. So there isn't a single solution. I think it's going to be a collective effort with all our resources and bringing people together, and not limit ourselves, not focus on any singular application, open loop, closed loop, whatever that might be, but to be all inclusive, bro.
I agree. It's no different than how we talk about drilling. It's the right application at the right location to
Mhm.
make sure we're being successful, that we get the most out of that thermal battery of that location. It's not one fits one everywhere. And sadly, I've definitely been on plenty of projects lately where they go, well, this worked great in Austin. Let's
Sure.
do it in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. And it's like, wait a minute, this is not, what we wanted.
No, no, no. And we often hear this rule of thumb, probably in commercial, excuse me, light commercial and residential, far more than we hear it in commercial applications. But the rule of thumb really should be, there isn't a rule of thumb. You really need to evaluate each individual project based on its current needs, potential future needs, available resources. And those resources are not just natural resources, what the ground will provide, lakes, vertical available real estate, but the local resources. There are so many different loop installers out there: vertical drilling contractors, horizontal directional drilling contractors. We've been working with septic installers that are used to putting in finger systems. So now we're getting them to put loops in with their finger systems. It is going to just take some really creative thinking, and to be all inclusive, not exclusive, to get more contractors involved in meeting these demands, because the demands are not going away and they're not getting any smaller. It is definitely going to increase. And now we're getting the federal incentives are there, but the pressure is also there to grow the industry. And that's one of the initiatives that we have at Water Furnace. And really, that's the sole purpose of my job with Water Furnace, is to network with geothermal heat exchange contractors, drillers, both new and existing, and to help develop new contractors. We're seeing a surge in mechanical contractors who are wanting to control the time, the pace, the cost of their own loop installation. So we're training them to put their own loops in a variety of applications, and they can be vertical, horizontal, directional pond loops. And so there again, it's not one solution. I think it's going to be a collective solution by everybody in the industry.
Being the 21st century, first thing we need to do is retire the term rule of thumb.
Yes,
No
sir.
different than beating a dead horse or multiple other ones that we have that are
Yes.
colloquial poor. But maybe I'm going to shift it to the next time somebody throws out a rule of thumb, I'm going to go get that stick and I'm going to beat them with that stick. Because you're right. This is what's preventing us from scaling and
Sure.
having the reliability of what air source has been able to do or what conventional has been able to do. So,
and I'm not suggesting that you need to recreate the wheel and do an in-depth project design analysis on a residential job and test holes. And I mean, you got to be smart about it. You got to be practical about it. But I think there's a real need to do your research, find out what the local formations are, talk to the local drillers and loop installers, and not dictate to them what you want done, but rather have a open, insightful conversation. Hey, what are the possibilities? What works in these regions? What has been successful in the past? How can we push the limits? How can we extend this? And it used to be a 300-400-foot borehole was a pretty deep hole. We had a conversation earlier in a team's call that we're talking 800, 1,000 feet. We're now pushing that 1,000-foot limit, and that is becoming more commonplace in the industry. So all these things are going to come into play. It goes back to safety, planning, and communication.
I think it's important for us to also communicate on that piece of the complexities of drilling beyond 500 feet into 850 feet or 1,000, the complexities of effectively grouting that. How does the equipment change? What does the loop change? Even at Ball State, that first phase was 2 loops and clips. And how did that change installing in that? How did
that was brutal.
Sure, right? And so now we're saying, hey, let's set 1,000-foot loops and grout. And so are we using 1.5 inches? Are we using 1.5 inch trimmy? What does our piston grouter look like? Just like we need to go back to the science and physics. Sure. And the cool thing with what you're doing and IGSPA and whatnot is applying, there is help. There is expertise. We need to be talking to the OEMs. We need to be talking to the international. We need to have true discussions on that.
And I think the best way to do that, honestly, is to be involved, certainly on a local and a regional level. Get involved with your state associations, your state geothermal associations, water well associations. Be on those committees. Be part of those discussions. Express what your concerns are. But at the same time, there really is a lot of give and take. You can learn a tremendous amount from the other members that are in there, whether they're material suppliers, OEMs, equipment manufacturers, grout suppliers, and those committees and those human resources that we have are how we grow and learn and ask questions, solve problems. They are a tremendous resource. The association fees are typically very, very minimal, but the amount of information and expertise that can be gained through those is extraordinary. And then on a larger level, whether it's the national, whether it's IGSPA, those types of things. We are looking for people to be involved at every level. You don't have to be a company with 10 drill rigs to be on a board. Whether it's a training subcommittee, whether it's there's need across the industry for expertise at the local level and participation. Go to the shows, participate, and I really think that the information and the expertise gained far outweighs any financial cost that's involved.
It's unique, and I'm going to take us on an audible before we get back to what I want to talk about with pond loops and some of the cool stuff you can share there. Is as we talk about associations and whatnot, at a month ago at the New York Geo Conference, several good standing IGSBA members and National Groundwater Association members, we all ended up at dinner and said, it's time to have a Geothermal Drillers Association. And we filed for the 501c6 and have sent out the invitations and the opportunity to have a voice. We don't want to have a conference. We have the IGSBA conference and we have NGWA. We don't need a third destination. Maybe if it's Hawaii. No, I'm just kidding.
In February.
Yeah, but we see an opportunity not different from other industrial drilling groups that get together at a Logan's Roadhouse or something and get into a back room and talk about big projects coming up, or the opportunity for 3 companies to come together to tackle something like a Ball State, or a signatory company working in Chicago wanting to work with a company in a residential area that's non-signatory. Like, there's some drilling discussions that could be had, that as we're talking about everything from the loop back to the building, or we're talking about everything from protecting the groundwater down, drilling, we need to be that steward. But there's a gray area where we hope to be able to just gain some more communication, right? Some more planning, so that we can have better discussions with the big brother, big sister, organizations that are internationally recognized. So
I think that's a great point, Barack, and I'm glad that you brought that up. And earlier we were talking about applications and the inclusion of all applications. And I think the same holds true with the labor force, whether they're union labor, right to work, an open shop. It's going to take everybody. And I think there is room in the market for everybody. There are opportunities for everyone. So much so that all those labor forces are, like as with many of our industries, they're looking for people, not for a job, but for a career. There are huge training incentives. There are programs available, both union and non-union. And anybody that's listening to this video, what's a good way that they get a hold of some of these opportunities, Brock? Is that something that you can put on the website in terms of some of the training facilities or labor resources?
yes, absolutely. Obviously we could reach out to IGSBA, and you can reach out to NGWA. They have their training resources, these opportunities. Water Furnace, you guys have all sorts of groundswell initiatives, the same as your sister companies do. Everybody's working for this goal. We have these centers of excellences that are starting to pop up. You have Klamath Community College in Oregon that just started a water well drilling program, got the money. We have USDA money. We have Department of Energy money, and workforce development is the tippy top of everything to do with drilling, period, from groundwater through geothermal to rare earth minerals. There's lots of money to train, become a career, and have this amazing experience. And for the drillers out there, or the companies out there going, where does this go? What does this mean? We're finally at a point where we're going to push technology and training and resources that will scale us much faster than we've ever been able to. And now it's finding the right individual that wants to jump on the back of that rig and get muddy.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for episode 110 of the Driller Newscast. Thanks, Kevin. We spent an hour plus, and now you've seen about 45 minutes of our discussion. We're going to have one more chunk where we're going to get into pond loops and what Waterfronts has done with their 3-acre lake. There's all sorts of great folks in this industry that have shared knowledge and continued. And I value every minute I get to spend with people like Kevin Austin, Joe Carsons, Michael Albertson, Karen Eubanks, Jay Egg. The list goes on. We got so much knowledge here that we need to share it. Thermal networking, our new standalone series, is definitely one great way to have these people's knowledge, experience, fun, barriers to entry, all we have summarized up in a good location. Check out thedriller.com and check out what else we're doing with the Emerging Driller series. Ask Brock is coming back. Yes, finally, we have lots of them. It's been just how are we going to reintroduce Ask Brock to the industry? Have a fun, safe Memorial Day weekend. Let's remember the fall. We'll get into that more next week. That's it.